about today could inspire you a little on how to work on data strategies. That's my goal here. And well, I hope you like it. I will go through the presentation and try to do that in 40 minutes or so to leave some space for your questions at the end. So I would love to hear your feedback and your questions on this. So let's get started. And okay, first of all, let me introduce myself, give you a bit of my story. Well, I dedicated most of my professional life to the financial sector, to a single company that at the same time seemed to be like several organizations. I started working in Banamex, which was the leading bank in Mexico, where I'm based. I'm based in Mexico City. And then it became part of Citigroup. And that was precisely what gave me the great opportunity to get engaged with data management after having been an enterprise architect for quite a few years. And yeah, I saw the opportunity of creating the first data governance office in the bank in Mexico under global organization, a global program. And it was that financial crisis in 2008 that gave me this opportunity. And at that moment, I had no idea of what I was getting into by creating the first data governance office. So I attended for the first time the EDW conference that is partnered by DAMA International, and that's where I learned about DAMA International, and I say my addiction to DAMA International started, because it was a few years after that I had the opportunity to create the chapter in Mexico with other good colleagues. And I led that chapter for 3 years before becoming the regional coordinator for Latin America and having the chance to coordinate and lead the Spanish translation of the DMBOK too. And after that, well, I became the chair of the President's Council. And I said, well, it's quite interesting to be in contact with chapters all around the world. So after leading that forum for 2 years, I became the chapter services VP, which is my current role in DAMA International. This is my last year in the term. And well, that's what I do in my DAMA identity, the half of me professionally. And the other half, well, 6 years ago now, I decided to retire from corporate life and to start an adventure as an entrepreneur, creating SEGDA. SEGDA is a very tiny organization dedicated to two things mainly. One is to educate organizations, to train organizations and professionals on data management topics, and to provide certain consulting services, mostly focused on data strategy. I help organizations to build effective data strategies. It's kind of weird, but the very first project I got involved as an independent consultant was precisely to help an organization here in Mexico to define their data strategy. And at that point, I was very well skilled to say what a data strategy, whether a data strategy was good or not, but I had no idea on how to develop a data strategy. So I started buying all the books I found on data strategy, looking for a method because the project was there. I had to get out of the project successfully. And I was looking for a step-by-step guide on how to do a good data strategy, and I found nothing. But I did find a lot of inspiration, and I came up with my own method. And guess what? Well, that worked pretty well. And I use that with other organizations and started talking about that method at DGUIQ conferences or the EDW. And all the feedback I normally receive happens to be good. I wonder if you also think that at the end of this chat. But that was what inspired me to put that method in a book. This is the book I'm going to talk about today, the method that is described there. And this is the story. Well, that was my story. And now the story of my book is that it was December 2021, the first data governance and information quality conference in person after the pandemic. And I was delighted meeting very good friends. And I happened to share the lunch table with Danette McGilvray, who was collecting signatures from all her friends on her book. And I just told her, hey, I would like someday to write a book and to do exactly what you are doing, collecting signatures. And 10 minutes after that, she was sitting next to me, asking me what I wanted to write about, what I was doing at that time. And I told her my experience with this method that I had put together. And she said, Marilu, you have to write this. You have to create a book. And at that moment, she started giving me a lot of advice on how to become an author and how to publish a book. So it was less than a year after that my book went out into the printing, and thanks to Steve Hoverman. And it was delighted. The book went out, the first version on September 2023. And I decided to write it in English, although it's not my main language, because I wanted to share my thoughts with some of the thought leaders that, being involved with DAMA International, I have had the fortune to meet during these years. And also, I'm very proud to say that I have built good friendship with most of them. So I decided to include in my book an interview on what their thoughts are on data strategy from some great thought leaders like Bill Inman, Melanie Mecca, Tom Redman, James Price, David Plotkin, Hakan Evinson, and of course, Danette McGilvray, my mentor in this project. So that's why I launched my book first in English, and the tour of the book around the world started. It was less than a month after the book was out that I presented that in China. And one question from the audience really impressed me. Someone was asking me, how can data strategy become a verb? And I said, well, with my PAC method. And ever since that moment, I adopted that analogy to talk about my method. So I will ask you at the end of this chat if you think that you can make data strategy a verb with my method. Then I presented it in DAMA Calgary, And last year, I had a half-day tutorial on the method at the EDW. This year, I'm conducting a full-day workshop on the method. And that same workshop is going to be, I'm going to present that at DAMA Vancouver at the end of May, and at DAMA Calgary the following week. So I'm very delighted to having the chance to spread this message that I'm bringing to you today around the world. And I also started presenting the book, the method, in different universities because I think this measure deserves to be shared with young students that are getting prepared to tackle the data game in the world. And my last stop last year was in the DAMA, the International DAMA Day in Prague. Well, to celebrate the first anniversary of the book in September last year, the Spanish edition went out. And this year, I hope before the second anniversary, we can see the Chinese edition, the Japanese and Portuguese versions of this book. So my goal for today is to share with you what's the value of data strategy, the power of Canvas, and the overview of the data strategy PAC method. Well, this presentation is called How Data Strategy Works as a Cornerstone to AI Projects in Analytics. And the thing, and it's not new for anyone, is that AI has grown so strongly in the last years that wherever we go, we hear AI in all the presentations, everyone, and I'm not the exception. But the thing is that some research from McKinsey last year says that 65% of the organization surveyed are now regularly using AI tools, and reflecting the growth in the use of AI to support data management. And that's interesting. But Gartner is also telling that, well, a lot of organizations, 79%, are already using AI and in the analytics domain. And Accenture says, well, yes, and most of the organizations that have already invested in AI tools have exceeded their expectations. But what's behind the AI tools really when we talk about data? AI tools do not come alone, and they are not free lunch. There are some impacts that we need to consider. And most of the organizations that have already started using AI tools can tell us that the most significant challenge they are facing is on data quality, and of course, the volume of data they are dealing with, but also data privacy and data security, without mentioning the ethics in data handling. But these topics, you know it because DAMA is what DAMA International, through the chapters, that's what we talked about how to manage the data in the proper way. So, well, for me personally, I always like to do analogies for data management with whatever things, daily things that we see in our life. So I like to compare data management with buildings or houses, and data management is always one of the most expensive things to do when we deal with, well, other than purchasing technology tools, but it is expensive and it doesn't show off. It's not like producing very attractive visuals on with intelligent tools to tell stories, but it's the difference. It's like the foundation of a building, and this is the not investing the right amount of money, resources, and time on the foundations can make the difference when we have these earthquakes. The difference between a building staying entirely and still after the earthquake and the building collapsing. So it's the same. If we don't invest in data management, organizations can even collapse if we don't do that. And data strategy is the cornerstone for that. I like to start with certain stats, my talks. And one organization I like a lot is BARC, the Business Application Research Center. I normally go after their studies, their research. And this one I like a lot because this is a research on the reason behind silos, data silos. Most of organizations always complain because the existence of data silos where data is not properly shared across the organization. And well, there are a lot of reasons for that, but the one that attracted me was the lack of data strategy. Being one of the main reasons for data silos. And the same organization did another survey on the barriers to build data culture. You know, also a buzzword that we have heard over the last years is data literacy. We want to develop data culture in the organizations. But what stops organizations from doing this? Well, most of the people surveyed said that the lack of a data strategy is one of the most relevant reasons. And that led this organization to create a framework, a data culture framework, where data strategy is one of the pillars. But which are the impacts of not having a good data strategy? And what do I mean by a good and effective data strategy? Well, I mean an open data strategy and a holistic data strategy. So what happens? Well, normally we can see a lot of overinvestment in technology platforms. And it's not that the technology platforms are bad at all. They are great. They could be great. There are great platforms out there. But if we are not clear on which problems we want to solve with them, most cases show not ROI after using or pretending to use the tool for a while. We don't see articulated resources working together around data management. That's what I call functional silos. It's not that we don't have people working on data storage or operations or data integration or even data quality. But most of the organizations I have had the opportunity to interact with have functional silos. All these teams working in an isolated way without a proper orchestration or coordination among them. And well, I already mentioned the information silos, but all this together can bring a lot of high cost maintaining the data management practice without real value being perceived by the top management in the organizations. So after a while, this can bring some rejection to data management initiatives. But what is strategy? And I found a way to explain this with certain metadata of the term strategy. The first thing is the origin of the word strategy. It comes from the military domain. And there are a bunch of definitions out there. When I started buying all those books on data strategy, I found a lot of those definitions on strategy, before data strategy, on strategy. And you can find those definitions out there, but the one that kept my attention was this one that I found in Peter Aikens and Todd Harbour's book on data strategy and the enterprise data executive. And they say that strategy is the highest level guidance available to an organization focusing on activities on articulated goal achievement and providing direction and specific guidance when faced with a stream of decisions or uncertainties. Who normally defines a strategy? It's normally defined by an elite team. And the privacy tells that, oh, you have to keep your strategy secret, as secret as possible, because if the enemy gets to know your strategy, you are lost. Well, if now we want to describe data strategy, it's kind of similar. The definition that Peter and Todd did for data strategy, well, they kept the same strategy definition. They only included the word data, but it's the same. The scope, well, most of the data strategies that I have found, that I have seen, happens to be like very technology oriented. Those are like architectural documents saying how the organization is moving first, some years back, to the data lake, or to the data ocean, and or then to the cloud. And now most of the data strategies documents say how to move to AI. And again, defined by an elite, a very close team of persons. And the privacy, again, this is known by very selected people within the organization. The belief is that, well, and it also takes a lot of time to produce it. So a lot of organizations, when I start talking about data strategy and the relevance of it and why they should dedicate some key stakeholders to define that, they say, yeah, that's interesting, Marilu, but we're in a hurry. We need to solve our current pain points. We don't have time to go back and dedicate months to define a data strategy. So my own definition of data strategy is that, first of all, I say data strategies in the plural, not a singular thing, are the highest level guidance. I took that from the definition from Peter Aiken, in an organization on intelligently assigning resources to work in an integrated way to achieve data-related goals and contribute to achieving business strategic objectives. That's very relevant. The scope, well, this has to be an holistic data strategy, not only talking about the needs of a specific part of the organization or specific organization units. It has to consider the whole organization. And it has to be defined by stakeholders representing the whole organization. That is part of being an open data strategy. But it also has to be open from the sense of being able to be findable and understood by most of the organization people that needs to have a guidance on what they are doing daily. My belief is that this can be produced in 9 weeks or less with the participation of stakeholders from all over the organization. I've been teaching, training people on data management for almost 10 years now. And on DAMA International Guide, the DM book. And normally when I finish my training, I get similar questions from my students, being overwhelmed with all the things that have to be done. Well, it's not only data governance, it's a bunch of other functions that have to be considered. Where should we get started? And I normally say, well, the first thing is where you are at this point, getting trained. You need to educate the organization to hopefully acquire a common vocabulary on data management, on what metadata is, or what data integration means, or so on. And then you need to realize where your organization is standing. And for that, there are several options of maturity models, data management maturity models. But if you don't have resources to pay for a formal maturity model, well, the most practical thing that you can do is take the DMBOK context diagrams and use them as a checklist. But you need to realize where you're standing. And once you do that, then you can start doing your data strategies. And with that, you will very naturally be able to define the best operating model for data governance, data quality management, metadata management, or whatever other function you want to start formally adopting. So, as I mentioned, I didn't find, when I was involved in that project, I didn't find any clue on how to produce a data strategy, but I did find a lot of inspiring sources. And the first one, well, guess what? It was data management wheel from DAMA International, the one that you can find in the DM book. But for those days, I was also very involved with DCAM because I had the opportunity, well, first to be trained and then to be part of the translation team that translated the DCAM to Spanish. So I'm very, very familiar with that data management maturity model. And a lot of people have asked me, hey, Marilu, which framework do you recommend, DAMAS or the EDMC model, the DCAM? And I say, no, they are not competing at all. They, for me, are like a perfect pairing of wine and good cheese. That's a pairing that I find by using DAMA framework in the wheel to understand what data management is, and the DCAM to understand how should I deploy, implement, and evolve over time in maturity my practice of data management. So for me, it's the best way to use them is together. But and well, I mentioned DCAM because that's the one I'm more familiar with. But what I recommend is that whatever data management maturity model you choose, as long as it is capability based, that's good, because that happens to work like an anchor or a guide in your path. It's like having the questions of an exam beforehand, not the answers, but the questions will help you get better prepared for the exam. So knowing which capabilities are going to be measured if someone comes and audits your practice, that's good, because you will know from the beginning what you need to build and which evidences you need to start producing as a footprint of your practice, your data management practice. And if you put that in your roadmap, that will very well help you to create uh, expectation management, to manage the expectations not only from your team, but from your management, senior management, and also from external auditors. But the most powerful source of inspiration for me was the use of the business model canvas produced by Alex Osterwalder back in 2005. I learned about that model when I was teaching an enterprise. I had the opportunity to design enterprise architecture diploma with a university here in Mexico for my architects in the bank um, some years before getting involved in data management. And I learned about this. I wonder if some of you have already seen this in the past and have the chance to use it. For me, it was a great tool. It is a great tool that has been used around the world for almost 20 years now. And the basic of this is to depict in one single slide, a canvas, any business model for any organization, public sector, private sector, any size of the organization, you can do it. When I learned about this method, I started using it when I was in the bank. For every time I changed my role or my scope of function, the first thing I did was to create my canvas. Once I got involved with DAMA International, for all the different roles that I mentioned at the beginning I have had, the first thing I do is I do my business model. And now back in Prague, I had DAMA International producing the DAMA International business model canvas, and I'm a canvas lover. So that's why I said, come on, if this has been so successful for Alex Osterwalder, why couldn't I use a canvas to describe each of my data strategies? And that's precisely what I did. But um, uh, the first thing, remember I mentioned that for me, data strategy is not in the singular, but in the plural. Well, I also found another inspiring source that was the data strategy framework from Donna Burbank, a very recognized data strategist. And I saw it and I said, oh, this is what I need. But I only need to change this, this, and that, and add this, this, and that. So it became this one, this framework. And of course, I have the permission of DAMA International and the ADMC Council and Donna Burbank to mention these inspiring sources for me in my book. But this is what happened with my strategy framework, that I recognize at least 4 types of data strategies that are very interrelated. I start with what I call the data alignment strategy, because remember that data strategy has to be tightly aligned to the business strategy. So the first thing I do, with the participation of representatives of all the organization in a workshop, very pragmatic way to use their time, that it's very valuable. And every day they have less time to dedicate to. The agendas are very tight for these people. So, and by the way, when I say representatives from all the organization, it's not necessarily top level senior management. I have workshops with senior management and middle management people, and even people from the operational level, as long as they are aware of the pain points, their motivations, their business strategic objectives, and they can tell which are their pain points, data pain points, and they can recognize those behaviors on people when they relate to data that are not healthy at all and that are putting us on risk. So that's the first thing that we do here. And we not only identify the business objectives, the motivations, the pain points, but we prioritize those. It's very different when you go to interview one by one of these stakeholders. Each one will tell you that their problems are the top priority problems. When we bring them together at the same table, and they have to put their problems on the table, but at the end, they need to vote for the three top priorities for the organization, everything changes. So with that as input, then we can move to define the data management strategy, which is not anything different from just prioritizing which of the data management functions, and these boxes are the same slides that we have in DAMA wheel, but we need to prioritize which of those have to be worked formally first and which ones go next. And I say that not more than three functions have to be worked at the same time. And in those three functions, data governance, which is here at the top, is one of the three always. So should we start with data quality or with data security or with data modeling? That will depend on the priorities that we identify here in the data alignment strategy. Sorry. And well, then when we have that prioritization here in the data management strategy, then it's time to socialize that with the IT team working on the IT strategy, because now we know which problems we need to solve with technology. Then if the priority is working on data quality and metadata management, they can help us defining the best tools, whether we already have them or we need to acquire, purchase new tools to solve those problems. And of course, there are other type of strategies that need to be socialized with, like a change management strategy or communication strategy across the organization. And normally, there's at least one strategic initiative going on. Some years back, it was digital transformation. All the organizations had that. Today, most organizations have at least one AI strategic initiative. So we can leverage those initiatives to start deploying the data management practice in the with the priority that was defined up here. So once we have the data management strategy, then we can define the data governance strategy and the data strategy for each of these different functions. Each one deserves to have its own strategy. And all the strategies are connected through a common thread, a connecting thread, which are the priorities coming from the data alignment strategy, the motivation, the business objectives, the motivations for data management, the pain points, data pain points, and the behaviors that are not healthy. So that's how my method, that is called the PAC method. PAC stands for Pragmatic, because we need to have a pragmatic way to use the time of all these stakeholders that I mentioned. It has to be agile because we never know uh, how we are going to face or which changes we are going to face around us. And every year it's more complicated, and we are seeing more changes around the world and in each country, and that impacts each organization necessarily. So we need to be very agile in responding to those changes. So data strategy has to be, or the data strategies have to be live documents. And it has to be communicable in the sense to be very easy to communicate to whoever needs to have a guidance on how to move forward with the different data related initiatives. So that's what makes this method a really attainable method to define holistic and open data strategies. And for each of those different strategies that I mentioned, I said, well, why couldn't I have a canvas for each of those strategies? And that's precisely what I did. Well, before going to the canvases, and the method is comprised of three components. The first one is the framework that I already explained. The second component is the set of canvases, one for each of those strategies, and the roadmaps. And the third component is the 10 steps. Of course, I got inspired by my mentor, Janet McGilvray, with her 10 steps to quality, trusted information and quality data. So we have 10 steps to follow to produce these strategies and to embed those strategies into the business strategic planning that happens normally every year. So this cycle goes around every year. And this is the first canvas that I produced for the first strategy, the data alignment strategy, where the first thing that we ask the stakeholders participating in this workshop is, which are the business questions that leaders normally ask themselves every day when they start working, and that not always get answers because perhaps the organization simply doesn't have the data to answer those questions, or the data is not trusted data, and the information they get and the reports they get are not trusted reports because they don't have accurate data, they don't have good quality data, or the reports and the answers simply are coming out of date and very lately. So we get those questions and we get the data pain points. And with those, this is a canvas more similar to the business model canvas, where once we know that and we start by prioritizing the enterprise strategic objectives, then we can identify the data domains, whether it's customer or products or providers or whatever. And we prioritize those. Everything in each of these boxes is not only listed and synthesized from all the information we collect from the stakeholders, but it's listed in a prioritized way. So once we have the priority of domains, data domains, we identify who the providers of those data domains are and who the consumers are. And something very relevant at this point is to define the data principles, because data has to be managed based on principles. And those principles are agreed up and here. And then the next canvas is for the data management strategy. And having those motivations and data-related behaviors and data pain points as common inputs for each of the data strategies, we can start segregating in time. First of all, the first role is about data governance. And here we are going to list the capabilities for data governance that need to be established. There's where having a data management maturity model based on capabilities is key for this, because we list the different capabilities. It's not that we need to establish and mature all those capabilities from the beginning. Say we choose to have DCAM. Well, DCAM says you have this set of 6 capabilities for data governance. Not necessarily I have to establish all those capabilities from the beginning. And even if I decide to do that, that doesn't mean that I need to take those capabilities all to the most advanced mature level. I can start saying, well, those are in level 3 because we are working on those. We are developing those. So I can repeat those in the midterm or the long term to take them all to the highest level of maturity. But I can also find other type of capabilities very specific to the organization. And here, the next row is for the functions, the data management function. Remember, I mentioned just 2 at a time plus data governance. So I list them here. And the data domains, which are already prioritized from the previous canvas, and the sources, on which data sources are we going to start deploying this data management functions. It could be a data repository like a data warehouse or data lake or the data lake house or whatever, or we can say the centralized customer database, whatever. We need to very clearly scope what we are going to do. And then the initiatives. Remember I mentioned at least one strategic initiative is running? Well, we list that here. And finally, we define the metrics. We need to measure what we are doing to show the value, the improvement we are doing. And it's very relevant to always list those partners, external or internal partners that will help us with this. So stating the strategy this way will help us to level setting the expectations on data management. And similar things happen when we move down to data governance. We take the same capabilities that we listed in the previous canvas and we put them in the first row or capabilities. Here we have the same inputs, and the next row is for structure. Which roles and how many are we going to have? Normally, we start with the data governance leader and perhaps a small team, data governance analyst or policy management lead or whatever. And the data owners and the data stewards, how many data stewards should I have? Well, instead of pretending to ask for 2 data stewards in each organizational unit, we are going to start small and incrementally grow in time. Where do we, well, that's one of the recommendations from DAMA International. You must have heard this before, but where do I get started? Well, I can get started in the organizational unit that was defined to have the top priority problems, agreed with all the stakeholders. So it's not a decision of the data governance team. It's a decision of the organization. And then we list here those organization units. Oh, and I skipped the objects to be governed. It's not true that we need to govern everything in the organization, at least not at the beginning. We need to be very clear on what is that we are going to govern. And the objects to govern could be a business process. It could be a strategic report or a regulatory report, or it could be a database, or it could be a set of critical data elements. The critical data elements that represent the customer contact data elements. And I can start a short and limited scope as that. But once I put it here, and this is approved by all the stakeholders from all the organization, and I find, for instance, oh, I'm going to work with finance domain data here in the long term, which is normally, if we use 1 year per term, it will be the third year. If the people from finance say, oh, why are we left to the end? Well, you are not left to the end. All the stakeholders agree that that's a priority. Well, finance information or data is going to be attended. So it's a way to manage expectations. And of course, I can't forget the business model canvas. And I believe that each data management function, starting with data governance, can be modeled as if it was a business process, a business area or a business process. So I start by defining the business model for data governance, but you can do that for data quality management, for data architecture, for whatever function you pick. Because it's very relevant to start by defining who our customers are and which value proposition as a data governance team we are offering to those customers, and how we are going to connect and communicate this value proposition to those customers, and how we are going to maintain the relationship with those customers. And all of those areas will bring benefits for having a data governance in place. But then we can define which key activities are essential to be done to offer this value proposition, and which resources we need, which partners we need, and which is the cost structure of this. We don't need to be convincing the CFO every year on maintaining the data governance team in place. And well, you can do exactly the same for each of the business function. You just change the name of the function that you are documenting, but the canvas is very similar. Once you have those canvases defined with 3 years scope, then you can derive the roadmaps with the milestones coming from each of the different strategy. Some milestones will come from the data management strategy, some will come from the data governance strategy, and the green boxes here represent milestones in which you show to the organization that the data governance, for instance, is already operating, and you are giving value to the organization. So you don't have to wait 3 years to establish the practice. No, you go in parallel, maturing your capabilities. At the same time, you're offering a real tangible value from being operating. And well, this is the 10 steps cycle. You have to start by defining who is going to participate in those workshops, and get those insights, the business questions, the problems, and the behaviors to modify. And then you start working in each of the canvases for each strategy. You will define the business model for data governance, and then your roadmap. Once you have those elements, those artifacts, you can start socializing, communicating those across the organization, and integrating those into the business strategic planning. This has to be repeated every year. And finally, these are the type of stakeholders that you will want to invite to your workshops. And for the first one is where you have most organizations, units participating. Once you have those first priorities defined, then you start working on the data management strategy with less stakeholders, and the specific data governance or specific functions strategy is normally work with the team that is going to operate or is already operating that specific function, and the partners of that team. And that's it. That's my proposal for producing data strategies. And I know I took over a little bit more than what I expected to, but I hope we still have some minutes for some questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Mary Lou. That was a great presentation. Lots of fantastic content to digest with the strategies and the ways to approach, obviously strategically, but to do it along the way where you're making progress. You're not going to solve everything all in 1 year. It's a multi-year process, right? But you can develop these wins along the way. I also love how you bring together, the DEMBOK wheel, but also DCAM. It's, to the point that no one thing is a solution for everything, right? You've got to blend some of these different frameworks and strategies to be effective, and I think that's a great point that you make there. We do have some questions that are in the chat. I just wanted to go through those. So if anybody is, hopefully, you can stay with us and we can go through those quickly. But if you do have to drop, we do understand, but we'll try and answer some of these here. Hector Dominguez asked the question. He says, I wonder about how you calculate ROIs when planning a data strategy, or when planning a data strategy plan.
And that's a very interesting question. And when doing these interviews with the different thought leaders, I remember discussing this with Hakan Edvinson. He's a great enterprise architect and data management and data governance lead, and he's the author of Data Diplomacy. And when I asked him, hey, how can I convince top management on this? Because it's hard to define an ROI on this. And he asked me, how do you go to them and try to sell them producing a data strategy? And I said, well, through the data pain points. And he said, good, but not enough. Because data strategy is like selling data strategy is like selling health insurance. And I said, whoa, yes. Because he said most organization and top management leaders, they want to kill their immediate pain points. They are not thinking of the pain they will suffer in 2-3 years if they don't invest in an insurance. Similar to the health. And in some countries, like my country, the health insurance culture in general is very poor. So thinking on paying for an insurance, I prefer to have food in my table. But when people find an emergency to go to surgery, there's a problem, a huge problem. So similar thing happens with the data strategy. We need to build the ROI not in terms of immediate return on defining the data strategy, but in securing the future of the organization by investing today. It's very similar. So now I'm trying to connect insurance selling people to learn from them.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. I think you can definitely quantify risk too. I think the challenges that I face that when you put it in terms of risk,
Yes,
to an organization that tends to get attention. And so if you can
yes.
quantify that, then that takes a place of, using some sort of a, metric value that executives like to use. So next, go ahead.
And I just would add something that I normally recommend. If you can build a business case on something that the organization already suffered in the past, it's just a matter of collecting data and producing the business case, because it's not that you're going to tell the story on, oh, you pay this for the data strategy and you will get this benefit. You need to show how much the organization has already lost, or on either fines or the waste of technology tools that never showed the ROI because of not knowing in which order you have to invest. So try to calculate that and produce a business case. But
yeah, absolutely. Efficiency costs, everything like that, for sure. One other question we have here says, Ryan says, I agree with the importance of aligning the data strategy to the business strategy, but at the highest levels of the organization, how can this be done if the overall business strategy is not clear, but is well defined within functional silos?
oh, that's very true. And I didn't believe that an organization couldn't have an explicit business strategy. And I think it was my second project as consultant. It was a huge multi-year organization here in Mexico. And I was so surprised that no one, no matter at which level I was talking with someone in the organization, no one could tell me for sure what the top 3 priorities were, top business strategic objectives were for the organization. It was never written anywhere, never published anywhere. I'm sure they had a business strategy for sure, but it made it so complex to people to understand what they were doing in the daily basis, what they were contributing to. So what I did was, okay, it's not written, it's not published, but you can tell. And then in the first workshop, I collected all those objectives, and with those stakeholders, they prioritize those. And from that moment forward, then we had a common input for the other data strategies. But that happens.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I don't see any other questions in the chat, unless anybody else has one they want to raise their hand. Other than that, I will thank you again very much for your presentation. I think that our members got a lot of great information. I love the Canvas and that strategy using Canvas there. I love that approach. Yeah, with that, I know we're over time. I want to thank everybody for hanging with us there a little bit over time. But
Yeah.
it was great to see you, and I look forward to chatting with you in the future.
Thank you. And I just want to mention that the book comes with a companion website where you can find some of the images in the book, so you can use them in your own presentations to sell this within your organization. It has templates of the canvases, and it has a case study, so you can get inspired to take this and make the data strategy a verb within your organizations. Give it a try and let me know how it goes. Thank you.